Well, guys, the proverbial shiznit sure hit the fan this weekend when Meghan McCain decided one more time to step into that briar patch and attack former McCain advisor, former Lincoln Project guy, Steve Schmidt, and attack him in a utterly dishonest way, implying he's a pedophile. And man, did she open up like Pandora's box. Schmidt not only hit back with attacks on her, he hit back with attacks. He finally spoke the truth about John McCain, which some of us have been waiting for a lot of years. We've spoken the truth, but because I come from the left side of the aisle, people tend not to believe it. This is going to end up being a long one. I'm going to try to do my best to get through this, but as some of you may know, I wrote a book on John McCain in 2008 called The Real McCain, actually an Amazon bestseller. Go get yourself a copy if you'd like. And really what the crux of it was about was how this man who portrayed himself as this maverick, as this sort of, this guy who would do what was right even when everything was up against him, when he was in the toughest of situations, you could count on him. It just wasn't true about his political career. It was very true. Unlike the Swift voters, I gave him full credit. And the Swift voters were the people attacking him from the Bush campaign, lying about him, who eventually did the same to Kerry and saying he was a Manchurian candidate. Listen, the man did something that I don't think almost any other human alive could do. He chose to stay in captivity and be tortured until they agreed to release all of his men with him. And I always gave him full credit for that. But as a politician, what his pattern was a combination of anger, a lot of anger, having political courage at moments almost to make up for his mistakes and as a way of cleaning his slate, and that of a gambler. Those are dangerous traits in a president of the United States. The truth of the matter is that, again, I look back at him now, compared to most of the goons that the Republican Party puts out there today, of course, he would have been far better than them. He had a conscience. He was human. He often eventually would seek reconciliation with those he fought with and attacked. He wasn't Rand Paul or Ted Cruz or Donald Trump. He wasn't an evil, grifty, completely self-involved, ideologically right-wing nut. But he had a lot of issues, and the myth that was created around him, the Straight Talk Express, and that he was this guy who stood up to his party, was simply not true. And this is what my book was about. And the truth is that everything I'm going to tell you right now, people are like, you got to tell us the truth. I told you then, but I'll tell you again because it's been a long time. I'm not sure everybody read the book. And, the fact of the matter was that, during the 80s when he was first elected to Congress from Arizona after marrying an heiress, Cindy McCain, or Cindy, I don't remember her name then, he'd been there 2 years and he ran for Congress. He ran on his background as this incredible sacrifice as a war hero, and that's why he won. But he got himself involved in the Keating 5 scandal, a big scandal. You have to go back and look with savings and loans and deregulation and payoffs. And that was the reason he responded with his huge, almost like a mission, I'm trying to think, a crusade to get campaign finance reform passed. It was to cleanse himself. And that was good for all the rest of us. He fought for it too. It was the right thing to do. But that was the crux behind it because that's who he was. I had numerous stories, and Schmidt tells some of these stories of the abusive way in which he treated some of the people around him. The lie that he made Schmidt get up and tell for him about an affair he was having with a lobbyist. Now, these things came out later. My book came out May 1st, 2008. Schmidt didn't get there until July. I was no longer reporting on him, and so that's not even stuff that I'm privy to. And if you're all hoping you're going to find out about the secret Russian connection here, I don't have that either. That Rick Davis, obviously, who Schmidt has accused, look up his record. He worked for Yanukovych, the Putin puppet in Ukraine. He worked with Deripaska, the oligarch who's been accused of all manner of crimes and is under sanction and was going to build a mine in Kentucky for Mitch McConnell. Wink, wink, wink. I'm sure there's no untoward things going on there. But this is, John McCain had a connection to these folks. And from what Schmidt's telling, he even helped them undermine Montenegro and almost hand over its government with this fake push for independence to Moscow. Awful. It's the same stubbornness that when he got into the Iraq war, he led by anger. The more people criticized him, the more he decided he was right. But there was this period of time, and this is what I wrote about after the 2000 election when Bush had smeared him. And it's almost like he did this out of anger, where he voted against Bush's tax cuts. He came out in favor of CAFE standards for cars and to try to sort of help the environment. He came out, he was one of the leaders on immigration reform. I mean, he came out as a moderate on so many issues that Tom Daschle, then Senate leader of the Democrats, and John Kerry sat down with him and tried to get him to switch to the Democratic Party, and he thought about it. He also thought about running as an independent. He also thought about running as John Kerry's VP. But the key thing you need to know is, in the end, he made the choice for himself, and this is what Schmidt talks about, and this is what a lot of people don't know, is secretly he met with Karl Rove and minions of Karl Rove, and they guaranteed him they would get behind him if he would just stop fighting Bush on everything that Bush was trying to do and started voting like a Republican again. And you can see it in his record, like 90% turnaround. He went back to the 80s Republican he was. He started voting for everything the Republicans wanted him to do. I think by the time he ran for president in 2008 with the support of the party establishment, he literally may have had the most conservative record in the Senate. That's who the guy really was. He wasn't this mythic creature. Was he awful compared to today's Republicans? No. But he was a man who made compromises for his career. He was a guy who behind the scenes was a ball of anger, who must have told Chuck Grassley, John Cornyn, and there's a list of people he told to go themselves, and frankly, they probably mostly deserved it. But the way he treated Kerry during that campaign, once he decided he was going to run in 2008, and once he got behind Bush in 2004, was awful. And so, people are complicated, and you need to look into the complications. They eventually reconciled. Schmidt says he eventually reconciled. But the things that he did, the abusiveness, and the fact that he wasn't some maverick, he really was just a kind of mostly a garden variety Republican who became more moderate because the media loved him for it, and because out of his anger for anybody who had attacked him, first Bush, then eventually Obama. After the 2008 election, he became very anti-Obama because of his pride. And, this is what led most of his career, and we should have an honest conversation about it. When I hear people say, oh, if John McCain were just here, we would blah, blah, blah. I don't know what we would do. Look, he had a moment when he stood up and he that capacity for reconciliation, Schmidt talks about, and said, we need to reconcile with Vietnam after he'd been tortured there, and John Kerry joined him for that. Incredible. When he ended up saving the Affordable Care Act by voting against getting rid of it with Murkowski and Collins, and saved it by one vote in 2018. Also, a great moment for him, although even then he had to do it in a dramatic way with a sort of last-second thumbs down to the vote. And this is what you need to know about him in the end, okay? So not this maverick, contrarian, whatever, really a guy who played the power centers, whether it was Keating or Rove eventually behind the scenes. He loved America in his own way. He was a patriot. He did some awful things, but I will tell you right now that he's not the guy that he's been portrayed as. And there's numerous stories that I've just shared with you, and there's many more out there that will tell you who he really was. I'll end with, he chose Sarah Palin. That was McCain the gambler. He would not stand up to her, scared to stand up to her because he needed her support in 2008 and when he ran for re-election in 2010, and shamefully said, build the dang wall. And the guy had led on immigration, and now he was demagoguing on the stupid wall. But he needed Palin's support. He wouldn't stand up for her. This guy who stood up to Vietnamese captors who beat him so he couldn't raise his arms above his head could not stand up to Sarah Palin and could not stand up to the right-wing forces in the party. And that's important because that's what the rest of them did too. We wouldn't be here today if people like John McCain, those that sort of quietly would speak out. Sometimes McCain would do that. Dick Lugar is another one who comes to mind, and Kit Bond and others from that, back then. If they had forcefully stood up against the rising right wing, maybe we wouldn't be here. That is the complicated legacy that's John McCain. That's something you should know.